Welcome everyone. I realize this is middle of holiday season, but I think it's good that we have this call because many of you have seen the actual results or your results, and well, the market is quite amazing at the moment. So we thought let's do this call and also let's see what's happening in the next 2 quarters because with those really amazing results so far. It's interesting to see that. So Anthony will definitely talk about that. But before we do that, I want to hand over to Frank. Frank will present a couple of slides on the things we do. And well, let's get started. So Frank.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter, and good afternoon, everybody that's in Europe, and good morning to our North America folks. Yeah, Peter, I also agree. I know the timing's not optimal in Europe for these calls, but I think it's important that we cover second quarter, what happened in the second quarter, and context view of what's going to happen going forward. Let me go back first, though, Anthony. I want to cover two quick things that I want to point you to from a GTDC standpoint before I turn it back over. One is we continue our podcast series. We're now up to 75, and we've done two recently. One, I want to point to the one that Anthony and I did probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the reason I think that one's interesting is because we had a great discussion on how Context goes about building their forecast and the kinds of inputs that they get and the information they use. So I think that would be interesting to you. And then I did one last week with David Grant, CEO of Westcon Comstor, and David talked about his view of what's happening in the technology market, distribution, as well as some of the exciting activities going on with Westcon. So take a look at those if you have the time. And then the second item I want to point to is that tomorrow we're releasing our latest research report. And essentially what this report covers is what we view as the evolving role of distribution in based on the technology changes that we're seeing in the marketplace and the role distribution is playing in ensuring that technology gets deployed effectively in the market. So that report is just coming out. In fact, I think it's actually getting released. What is today? Today or tomorrow. And so take a look at that, or actually it's the 29th, it looks like. So with that, Anthony, I'll turn it over to you and we'll take a look at the results from Context.
Yeah, thanks Frank, thanks Peter, thanks for having me again. I know it's middle of July, end of July, but still let's look at how we finish Q2, look at maybe also a bit of June results, because June was quite extraordinary performance we've seen in June as well, as usual on end of quarter. But I have a few slides on that, summarize what's happening in H1. And right now we're in the middle of preparing our forecast for the next 2 quarters and 2027. So it's very early preliminary data that I'm going to share with you on key categories that think that will be of interest to you. First on the PC one, what happened after Windows 11 and the price of components rising. And still on components rising, what's happening with server and storage. So I've got a few slides on this. Still early data, and we'll publish everything on the 6th of August, but I'll get back to that later on. So how did we finish Q2? So that's more interesting. Right now, I think maybe you already seen the context number, but let me move this so I can see myself. So what happened in June? In June, I said it was a special month, and yes, once again, a great result, double digit at plus 14.7% growth. What happened in June, and that's a lot of categories that I will keep mentioning slide after slide. It's of course our usual software that's been performing well. Also mobile computing plus 19% in June in revenue. Here we're talking in revenue. That's very important. And also all the infrastructure categories, the server, the components, the storage, seen in June a growth of more than 50% for each of these categories. 50%. Yes, that's what I said. That's incredible result for this category, but we'll see now how it looks from a quarter perspective. In quarterly perspective, Q2, double-digit growth in Q2. The last time we have double-digit growth in a European distribution IT market was in Q1 2021. On the back of a terrible Q1 2020, we all remember what happened in 2020. But like just to frame what's happening at the moment in the IT distribution market, this incredible growth in revenue. And that's a key that I'm going to keep mentioning as well in revenue, because if we're going to look at unit a bit later, that tell a different story for certain category. And of course, almost double-digit growth for the first half of the year, close to it at 9.9%. So great health and great performance revenue-wise in the IT distribution channel throughout Europe. That's great to see, but let's see how it will continue. But I think we should understand what's behind this 12% in Q2 or this 10% for the first half of the year. And as usual, I'm going to split that by two types of market, volume and value. Maybe I'm going to go directly to the quarterly view. In quarterly view, we can clearly see that value is the clear contributor to the growth. Okay, and what's beyond value? It's all the infrastructure category, your server, your storage. And we see this growth in revenue. And this is heavily linked to the price increase we're seeing in the components and component side that impact, of course, the configuration of server, etc., etc. So we see, and like the shortages of product as well. So that's why we see this amazing growth in terms of on the value side. I'll dig down a bit more into what's happening at sector level in a sec. But just to show the two different trajectories that we've seen in value and volume. Volume is still at 3%, the PC market doing well, but the clear star this quarter definitely in revenue was volume. Value, sorry. Value, beginning of the year, almost 20% growth for 19%. Amazing, while relative stable for volume at 3%. And when we looked at how we finish June, June was, we see that in the first slide, but tremendous performance in both categories, actually in both market type. But once again, great success in the value market. So let's look at the value market, and maybe we're going to spend a bit more time looking at this, because if we go one level down, I think that's more interesting to see what's happening in our top sector. In our context, we go value volume, and then we go top sector. And of course, because we track product by category, we could also go to category. But for this slide, I think it's interesting to just look at infrastructure. Plus 28% in Q2. If I put the number here for H1 is 20%. And what we've seen in infrastructure, and we're going to focus on server. Server in Q2, we see 1.6 billion euro revenue in Q2. That's 57% year-over-year growth. So that's incredible growth. But on the other side, the units were not growing that much. Actually, we see volume down in May, 15%. Volume down in June again, 14%. For both core and accelerated server, okay? So really what we see is the price of components that we see rising again in the infrastructure category with RAM. In some instance, we see the price of RAM from last year plus 500% price increase, 500. For SSD, some SSD, internal SSD, 225% for some instance as well. So that means like some configuration of server, even from Q1 to Q2, grew by 70%. That's staggering number of all this huge number we've seen on the server side. Of course, it's all due with the pricing of these components that I just mentioned. But what is interesting, and especially looking at distribution, is the impact on on maybe smaller and medium enterprise that are literally being priced out of this product. So we see more the large corporate resellers, the large enterprise like buying this kind of product because they have the budget for it and they can do it and they want higher spec and they can achieve this. And that's kind of, the SME being a bit priced out on this market. So infrastructure, it's server. And the same story will happen with storage. The same where huge growth in revenue, not so a decline as well in units. So for example, for disk array, we see the ASP growing like 54%. But the units for a disk array were down 7%. So you see this growth only driven by the price increases. And that's why we see in this number, not only for disk array, but for all the storage category, the NAS, the SSD, etc. We always see these differences between what's happening in revenue and what's happening in growth. If you track the market by revenues, that's great news for you. But if we look, let's say, at personal system, so personal system, double-digit growth, not bad, 11%. So beyond personal system, we will have our mobile computing, or desktop computing, or tablet, etc., etc. But for mobile computing, similar story. Actually, what we've seen in the first half of the year, a lot of stock being built in the channel, both at distribution level and at reseller level. Plus the demand being sensitive to the rising prices. So we see a bit of slowdown in terms of unit, but in terms of revenue, still double-digit growth. But in terms of what we've seen in the market, it's in terms of units, it's way less, like close to 1 to 2%, I think, for H1 for memory. So once again, looking at units, it's also a good indicator of what's happening in the market. I know it's difficult on this call to just look at unit because it won't make sense for software, but it's important to realize for both, let's say the personal system, the same story for desktop, units down, revenue up. Main explanation, once again, the components and the shortages. So great performance in revenue. In software, what we've seen in software in Q2, another double-digit growth. Behind there is security software, I think 15% growth. So there's a lot of regulation in place that need to security impacting security software as well. Office application as well, of course, growing as well at double digit. But the surprise was, or not really the surprise, but on this call, every quarter I talk about virtualization and how virtualization has been growing thanks to the different price structures that have been implemented at Broadcom VMware. But this quarter, for a while, we've seen a decline actually of 1% in revenue from Q2 2026 to Q2 2025. Of course, minus 1% is still a great result because remember in Q2 2025 we were seeing growth of I think for virtualization was 85% year over year, so it's difficult to beat this, but nonetheless that was interesting for me to note that. And overall for software and services, a very strong Q1 as well. Less good was both peripheral and telecom. So peripheral, it's been a bit more difficult in Q2, although we've seen monitor and toner performing well in June. Great end of the quarter for these two categories. I think monitor and toner maybe finished at plus 6% in June, but overall down. So monitor for Q2 was minus 1.2. So peripheral is suffering from the budget cannibalization that we've seen on other category. You want to upgrade your PC, that's going to cost it's going to be way more expensive. You want to upgrade your server, same. And so there is less money for your peripheral, for your monitor, for your accessories and things like this. And telco, minus 1 overall. But I think in June, we've seen a bit of uptake, a bit of activity from Samsung, especially in a few countries doing well on the smartphone on the smartphone side via the channel, something maybe we need to keep an eye on. But overall, the story, that's what I said, soaring revenue, but falling volumes for most of our top category where hardware is involved. Of course, software continuing on this great journey. Moving on, just looking at our country level, I think it's good to put that in perspective. Very positive across the board for the first half of the year. We've seen behind this is obviously always the same story that I've been keeping repeating today of the price increases we see on the component side. But we can still have some interesting development at local level in Poland, 34% in Q2. What's happening in Poland? There is two things. One, on the infrastructure side, there is some EU recovery funds that's being made available. And so that's impacting storage and server and infrastructure in general. But also we had this huge educational framework that boosts PC, monitor, interactive displays, and workstation, etc. in Poland. So that's why we see this huge 34% and tremendous 22%. The number, like the legend is should say 2026. I need to correct that before I send that across. And what we see also is in Spain. What's interesting in Spain, once again, remember last year they also had some EU fund. They had some projects. This year we also have some EU fund that finish in August. So some great results here in Spain, especially on the corporate reseller side. We see some great activities there, but plus 14%. In the Nordics also, it's being pushed, this double-digit growth by more the public sector as well. This needs to digitalization of public sector, and also we see a lot of things happening on the security side. So great public funding here happening in this country. In the rest of Europe, Germany growing well. It's a bit difficult in terms overall economy in Germany. Like GDP growth for the year is below 1%. It's like 0.3, 0.5%, something like this. But still, the IT distribution in Germany doing quite well. We've seen a lot of activity on the software side. We keep hearing like actually some workload also being done. Not buying more server, but trying to do something more on the cloud, so virtualization and things like this. But also infrastructure doing well. So Germany performing well despite a more difficult overall economical environment. The Italy that's starting quite badly the year at minus or 0% flat, but it was really a minus decline. It was difficult at the beginning of the year, but we've seen a lot of renewed activity on the business side, on the business channel, your corporate reseller, your SME. We've seen finally PC, both this time on units and revenue growing in Italy. So that's great news in Italy. Finally growing a bit. And the same story actually for Italy. One category that I was talking about recently was also monitor doing well in June and in Q2 as well. So great to see Italy like switching back to positive growth. The rest, France, UK, but France also double digit. We see a lot. It's also back of the impact of the price increase. We see some great number on mobile, computing, infrastructure, the same as everywhere. But what's important to note is really like Poland, Spain, Nordics, really public funding being available, helping the growth even more. Italy recovering well, and Germany, despite the odds, still growing. That would be interesting. So right now we're still finalizing our forecast and our country forecast. So that's sorry, I don't have the number yet, but you will be able to see that in our call when we publish this number on the 6th of August. So interesting at country level. What's one slide that I know a lot of you are keen, because everyone is asking that after this call to be sent to you, is to understand like the performance of vendor, both value and volume split. So here we're looking at the revenue for 2026. Sorry, maybe I'm not sharing the right set of deck. I can assure you that 2026, I make sure I change the legend, but it didn't change on this set. But it's 2026 versus 2025. So the revenue of 2026 for the first half and year-on-year growth. And what we can see here, but first of all, if we look at the infrastructure vendors, so the one involved in this space, so the HP, the Dell, So in Lenovo, you can see tremendous growth, especially for Dell, but Dell is involved in everything, including networking. Networking that's been doing quite well. I forgot to mention that earlier in Q2. And Dell also, like on the switches side, doing quite well there, but tremendous growth, like 60% growth, one half to the other. That's amazing. In terms of software, we see Microsoft, VMware, still Fortinet, doing like still amazing growth on this software side. Who else is there? NetApp, but as I mentioned already, involved in that, so that's quite good. And overall, by a volume vendor doing well, Cisco less so, but we know they have a slightly different business model, and distribution may not be a huge part of their go-to-market, but still, overall, for value vendors in the IT distribution channel, it's a great place to be, and we see that in this great number in revenue size. So if we look at volume, the top vendors still remain Apple. It's a bit more difficult. I know they just launched the Neo computers that's having tremendous results in the distribution channel. I don't know if you've seen the number. We've been communicating a lot on it, but great performance on the Neo side. But overall, Apple still number one, but in slight decline. But the top vendor in revenue are still the PC vendor. The HP, Lenovo, Dell, even Asus, Acer doing well. Here we notice, like, if we have to isolate one of the PC vendor, will be like this time, let's focus on, let's say, Lenovo. Lenovo clear above the rest because they did extremely well, not only on the PC side, but also on their accessory side, like the docking station, your keyboard as well. We've seen some good growth from Lenovo, and carry cases as well. So not only on the PC side, but on this side as well. On the bottom half, it's more difficult for the print vendor. Browser still above, so that's good, but the Canon, the Epson, the Lexmark in the channel, print is having a tough time at the moment, as it's been for quite a long while for both hardware and consumable. So interesting to see that. Xiaomi, it was a tough year-on-year compare, so that's why we've seen them there, but still they're in the top 10. So that's interesting to see Xiaomi still in the top 10. There is some vendors that were there last year that disappeared, or last quarter, maybe Taiwanese brand, like the MSI, the Gigabyte. I think they were in the top 15. That's not there anymore. But some great performance overall from the PC vendor, and especially Lenovo. I think what you want to talk about more is forecast for next year. But before, what context, before we show you a forecast, what I like to do and what we like to do is to compare what we forecasted versus what actually happened. And what happened is for Q2, we were quite spot on peripheral, on personal system. That was fine, but the main difference was obviously on the infrastructure. And that's explained by maybe 2 to 3 key elements. This 21% variance, that's huge. First of all, when we look at Q2 2025, in Q2 2025, I don't know if you remember, but we had this massive deal in the distribution channel. And the growth was for Q2 2025 already like 45% growth. So we thought, when we look at this number, I said, come on, that's going to be quite difficult to achieve double digit on already this high number. But because of the massive price increase that I discussed throughout this call already, plus some incredible regional performance, such as Poland, for example, but we see this huge variance in our infrastructure, and that explains why we miss our forecast by quite a lot in the infrastructure side. So, as I mentioned, we are in the middle of doing our forecast. So for the past couple of weeks, we have what we call live session, where we invite people from the industry. Maybe some of you on this call attended that, and we do by category. And it's really open this conversation where our analysts present their first views, their preliminary data. Then we hear from the people on the calls, and we have more calls, more one-to-one calls, more call with our country manager to finalize the numbers that's going to be published on the 6th of August 2026. But nonetheless, I think I wanted to share few categories that I discussed throughout this call already that could be of interest. That's going to be PC, both mobile and desktop, as well as server and storage overall. Let's look first at PC. And what I choose, so the number are still being decided, especially the quarterly number, but what I have, I'm going to share with the 2026 number, okay? And we see -4%. And what's interesting in this slide, I switched to what we were presenting throughout this presentation. I decided to put the unit to really highlight that this year is all about price increase and the impact that the ASP has on the revenue and on the demand as well here. So -4% in units. When we look at revenue, we're still finalizing this, but it should be around 7 to 8% growth for 2026. So once again, highlighting these differences between units and revenue. So -4 for 2026 in units. But what we will see, I touched that quickly earlier on this call on the performance for Q2 when I mentioned there were a lot of stock in both distributor and reseller level. They were preparing and buying in advance of the price increase that are coming and that came. And so we have a bit of clearance that I think is going to happen in Q3. So it's going to still see a decrease, but less than that we anticipated in our previous forecast. But in Q4, that's going to be where it's going to be quite a difficult quarter in terms of units. And that's why we think after a great first 2 quarters, we're going to finish at -4 in units for mobile computing. One thing also maybe I wanted to notice, because we usually have questions on this, is the share of AI PC. I think the share of AI PC now is roughly around 50% of the PC being shipped. Not a lot to do with actual demand for an AI PC. It's more because it's available and people are buying what's available. So it's not really it's more like a supply kind of driver rather than a demand. So that's for the mobile computing. So on units, -4, revenue probably +8. We finalize that later. Another category that surprised us, remember in 2025 and beginning of 2022, in 2026, it was the desktop. Desktop +30% last year, if you remember all that great renewal of PC, upgrade of Windows 11, etc. But we're still gonna forecast a decline for this category in 2026. This slide that I got is wrong, but -12%. Nonetheless, -12%, that's still higher than what we see in 2024. So it's a bit of a slowdown. We see this number in units like being not great. In revenues, that's going to be slightly better. Although we're going to see a lot of promotional activity to get rid of the stocks that we also have already at distribution level. So a lot of things. So the double-digit growth of desktop is over, and it's been over for a while now. So let's see how we finish the year, if we're going to be in line with this -12%. Looking now at server. Now, servers, that's a very difficult category to forecast. Of course, there is this revenue boom that we've been talking about that will continue. 60% growth. And that's both core and including this is both core and accelerated AI accelerated server. The config inflation that we've seen, like I told you, from Q1 to Q2, we already seen a price increase of 70% of configuration. So the price increase will really have a huge impact on this revenue forecast. And we're going to finish the year at this level. like the components the price of component keep rising, so that's no surprise to see that, and we should see that continuing even more in 2027. So I don't have the numbers there yet, or finalized, but we're working on it. And when we look also at storage, okay, to a lesser degree, we're talking still 30% growth, 37% growth in our mid-range scenarios, 38 in our optimistic, and 35 as a pessimistic scenario. 35 as pessimistic scenario, that's not too bad if we have to set a goal for ourselves next year. But once again, behind this is obviously the price component. But what we see also in Europe, something I didn't mention yet, is the data sovereignty and the push for more sovereignty in accessing our data. And we see that impact a lot the storage market as well, to repatriate data, to create data center in our in European country. So that definitely impact as well this huge price increase. So overall, in revenue, that's going to be a good year for the distribution channel, a great year for the distribution channel. We'll finalize everything to be ready on the 6th of August at 11, where we will have our webinar to publish the final number. You will see some communication coming out as well on this, from me on social, etc., to share this. And but yeah, revenue great, but the story is really the differences between soaring revenue and falling volume, and how that impact both unit and revenue. So with that, all passed, but I think it's fine. No, yeah, but thank you for your time. If you have questions, as usual, you can reach out to me or to Peter, and he can pass that on to me. I just need to send Peter the correct set of slide, not the one I presented. The number are correct, it's just a legend were not for some slide I noticed. So I send that later and we'll share that with you. With that, over to you, Peter.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Anthony. Well, really interesting data again. Hey, I've got one question on the forecast slides.
Yeah.
You mentioned forecast for 2026. Is this the full year forecast?
Yeah.
Or is this the Q3 forecast?
No, that's the full year forecast.
Okay.
Like what I didn't want to show you, like the quarterly forecast, because we're still working on how we're going to forecast Q3 and Q4. There's a lot of discussion on the differences, but I think for the full year, I think that's a good direction, because then I didn't want to show some slide. I know I put preliminary forecast, but then on the 6th, I will present something slightly different. I wanted to be safe. Yeah. So that's the full year. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Clear.
So full year. Yeah. That's, as I mentioned earlier, like double-digit growth in Q2 since Q1 2021. So yes, we needed this kind of event for us to reach double-digit growth, and the appetite of AI into the components market that's impacting all of us on the IT distribution.
Yeah.
And the price increase all over the place.
Yeah, but basically we could expect double-digit growth again in Q3 and Q4 then, because memory prices and component prices will stay high.
Yeah.
There's no reason to.
Yeah. In terms of revenue, when you see like the price of configuration, the price of the ASP and the PC going up,